quick and simple hike in Arizona turns dire when a 24-year-old registered nurse encounters the unexpected. Trapped and alone, she must push herself to the brink to survive. This is, against all odds, survival stories you simply won't believe. Welcome to The Cellar. This story takes us to Cane Beds, Arizona. Cane Beds is a small community of around 466 residents that sits 4 miles or 6 kilometers south of the border with Utah and 30 miles northwest of the Grand Canyon. 24-year-old Amber Kohnhorst traveled to Cane Beds in May of 2016. Amber was a Mayo Clinic hyperbaric nurse. To give some more context, a hyperbaric nurse is a registered nurse who provides care to patients undergoing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is a medical treatment that involves the use of high levels of oxygen to treat illnesses that require more oxygen than the body can normally metabolize. Amber was passionate about her job and the work that she did providing for her patients. During her off time, she loved to travel and hike. See, Amber was a born and raised Minnesotan who grew up with a love for nature. She loved the peace, tranquility, and beauty that each place she traveled to presented to her. This trip she was on was no different. She arrived in Cane Beds on May 20th, 2016. Her plan was to spend a week there while she volunteered at the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary located in Kanab, Utah. She hoped to spend all her free time exploring the numerous canyons, cliffs, and desert terrain in the area. Amber would arrive at her Airbnb and check in. Once she was all settled, she looked at the time and figured there would be enough light left in the day for her to go on a quick hike. She was recommended an easy hike nearby her Airbnb and soon packed her bag and set off for a little adventure. She would begin her trek, hiking for around a mile or so. She would eventually stop to rest. She sat down and took a swig of water while she took some photos of the area. But then, according to her own words, I caught sight of a bulbous sandstone escarpment that I couldn't resist. Amber began climbing the sandstone cliff, fueled by her motivation to reach the top. She soon reached her destination and finally had a glimpse of the beautiful view from above. As she looked around, it was breathtaking, but the euphoria she was feeling in that moment would not last long, as it soon dawned on her that she didn't know how she was going to get back down. She began looking around and located a tree at the bottom of the 800-foot cliff. She knew this was where she needed to get back to, but as she analyzed the area around her, she realized every route came to a dead end above a sheer cliff face. Trying not to further fuel her panic, Amber pulled out her phone and dialed 911. But there was zero service in that area. It was clear she was going to have to figure this all out herself. The sun was starting to set as 8 p.m. was closing in. Amber knew she couldn't stay the night. She had only packed a small amount of water and food and had no way of making a shelter. This was supposed to be a quick, easy hike, and her decision to climb up this cliff had put her in a very precarious position. She knew she had to get moving, and so she picked the route that seemed like it might be the best option and began her descent. It was steep going down. At points, she had to jump down 10-foot drops to reach the next spot below her. As she reached a narrow ledge, everything faded to black. Around an hour later, after 9 p.m., Amber regained consciousness. Her head was pounding. She was confused beyond belief. What had happened? As she looked around, she found herself within a narrow, rock-walled dungeon, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet or 3 meters by 3 meters. Up above her was the spot she had been standing at. It became clear right there and then that she had fallen around 100 feet or 30 meters straight down to the ground below. Sticky blood coated a large portion of Amber's head. It wouldn't take long before the reality of her situation began to settle in. She reached for her phone, attempting to call 911 again, but she still had no service. She attempted to move around, but her body screamed at her in pain. She was pretty certain in that moment that she had broken her back. Her head continued to throb, most likely a concussion, to add to her already dire situation. Amber still had her bag with her, so she shuffled through it, locating a paracord survival bracelet, 2 carabiners, some trail mix, a mini first aid kit, a whistle, and some wipes. She soon took the wipes and cleaned up some of the blood on her head. She then grabbed her whistle and began blowing into it, but she knew that the chances of anyone being around this area to hear her were very slim. In fact, the only people that knew she was out there were the Airbnb hosts. No friends or family had any clue of her whereabouts. The thought soon settled into her brain, am I going to die out here? Amber attempted to assess her injuries. Being that she was a nurse, she felt pretty confident that her back was broken. She checked herself over and figured out that she also had a broken nose, a torn ear, a broken pelvis, and at the very least, a concussion. As night fell, Amber knew there wasn't much else she could do but try and survive the night. She used her pack as a pillow and tried to get as comfortable as someone in her position can be. It had been in the high 70s during the day, but as night fell, it would reach 50 degrees quickly. The one benefit of her being trapped where she had fallen was that the walls shielded her from the wind. It was still cold, but it could have been far worse. As Amber tried to sleep, she prayed that animals in the local area would not find her. Wolves, bears, mountain lions, and rattlesnakes are all common in this area, and Amber was in no condition to fight any of them off if they happened upon her in the dark moonlight. Amber, luckily, would survive the night. She didn't sleep well, and her body hurt even more than it had the night before. It soon dawned on her that if help was looking for her, there was no way they would find her where she was. She knew if she was going to survive, she was going to have to get moving. Prior to this, Amber had taken some time looking at pictures in her phone, looking back on everything she had accomplished in life. She would eventually take a picture of herself, and with her finger she would write a note. I'm sorry. I'm trying to blow my whistle. I've fallen. She knew if she didn't make it, this picture was a sort of goodbye to her family and friends. But Amber wasn't going to just go down without a fight. She gathered her backpack and supplies and began crawling. She slowly made her way out of the area that she had been stuck in and miraculously proceeded to climb 50 feet or 15 meters up a 6-foot or 1.8 meter natural rock stairs. She made it onto a small ledge and looked up. Safety was another 50 feet or 15 meters above her. She tried with all her might, but it soon became clear that there was nowhere else for her to go. Her body was badly injured, and she was simply trapped on this ledge. In that moment, she had to come to terms with the fact that either A, she was going to die there, or B, perhaps rescuers would manage to see her from where she now was. Amber continued to blow on her whistle, but her strength was slowly fading as each hour passed by. All she could do was hope and pray that maybe, just maybe, someone would locate her. As the hours continued to pass by, Amber's hopes began to fade. But then, out of nowhere, a sound could be heard in the distance. It was a helicopter. Amber did all she could to get on her knees, waving and blowing her whistle, hoping the chopper would see her. It passed her by once, twice, 3, 4 times. They weren't seeing her. This was her only chance to be found, and they couldn't see her. She was waving aggressively now, just hoping someone on the helicopter would catch a glimpse of her. As the chopper came around a 5th time, someone on board finally made eye contact with her. The moment she locked eyes with the rescuer, she knew she had a chance. Now, just because rescuers found her doesn't mean getting her out was going to be easy. It would take 6 hours and numerous different attempts before rescuers finally made it to where Amber was. They gave her a drink and began putting a harness around her. It wasn't easy going, and in the end, Amber had to do some of the work climbing out of there, but she finally made it to the top of the cliff. Rescuers would help her to the helicopter, and she was soon on her way to Dixie Regional Medical Center in St. George, Utah. It had been over 28 hours since Amber had begun her hiking trip, and 9.5 hours since the rescue had commenced. In the end, the Airbnb hosts had become concerned for Amber when she never showed back up that night. They called it in, and thanks to them, a search effort was soon put together. At the hospital, doctors would find that Amber had compression fractures in her sacrum and vertebrae, a broken nose, a damaged ear, and a traumatic brain injury. The road to recovery was going to be a long one. She would spend 10 days at the hospital before being transferred to the Mayo Clinic, Rochester, for a further 7 days. Once she was released, she went home to her family's ranch in Minnesota. In August of 2016, Amber began the long and hard road of physical therapy. It would take time, but Amber would eventually return to work doing what she loves. This experience, in the end, did not slow her down. She still horseback rides, swims, camps, and yes, she still goes hiking. It was a long and hard road, and Amber is still affected by what happened. It's hard for her to run without there being any kind of pain, but in the end, she's grateful to be alive, and her positive mindset pushes her to live each day to its absolute fullest. So, what did everyone think of today's story? Please let me know in the comments section below. Also, if you have a story you would like me to cover on the channel, please send it to my email, which is linked in the description box below. On that note, thank you all for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. It's also very important that you hit the notification bell and turn on notifications, as you may not be alerted of my uploads if you don't do so. In the description box below, you'll also find a link to my merch store and a link to the Cellar Dwellers membership tier for the channel. If you're interested, please take a moment to go check those things out. And as always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to help support the channel is greatly appreciated. And until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.